Durst. Mr. Durst is present with his lawyers, the people who represented all jurors and all goods, have returned to the courtroom. Mr. Douglas Durst has resumed the witness stand. I'll remind you that you are under oath. Mr. DeGuerin, you may continue your cross-examination.
So, Mr. Durst, I want to kind of set the scene as it was right after Kathy's disappearance. Once the news broke, it was in the tabloids, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And that's something that's anathema to the Durst very existence, isn't it?
Yes.
Meaning, of course, that you didn't want that out there like that.
That's correct.
There's not much you can do about it, though, if the tabloids start running with a story, is there?
That's correct.
Is it true that the story alone could have had enormous economic impact, financial impact on the Durst organization?
That was a concern, but it did not happen.
But you were concerned about it,
Yes.
and you were also concerned about Kathy, your sister-in-law, Seymour Durst's daughter-in-law, being missing.
Yes.
And so I assume that, and you tell me if I'm correct, that you and others in the Durst organization were paying close attention to what the police were doing and what was going on in the investigation.
I don't recall. I recall reading about it in the papers, but I had no contact with the police.
Well, did you believe that they were thoroughly investigating it?
Lax foundation based on the witness's last answer.
If you had believed that the police had dropped the ball, you would have done something, wouldn't you?
Objection assumes facts not in evidence at this point. It's also vague as to time, relevance as well.
Well,
You
the
know,
time
I'll just
was
withdraw
clear.
it. It's fine. I'll just withdraw it.
Okay.
It's not
Go
worth
ahead.
it.
I had no reason to believe they had dropped the ball. I don't know what I would have done if I believed they did.
Well, you know that Seymour was doing everything he could.
Yes.
And Seymour could bring to the table any kind of economic needs that would be needed to try to find her,
Yes.
and he was doing that.
Yes.
And Bob gave every appearance of wanting to find her at the time, didn't he?
Yes.
Now, there have been allegations through the years, and there's even a lawsuit pending now. There's a lawyer with that lawsuit staring at you from the gallery here that accuse you or the Durst organization or Seymour or even Mr. Lewin of colluding to cover up Kathy's disappearance, right?
That allegation has been made. I can speak for my family, but not Mr. Lewin.
Well, you're insulted by it, aren't you?
Yes.
And you know that Seymour would not have done anything to cover up Bob's complicity if he believed that Bob was complicit, don't
That
you?
is correct, yes.
Although Seymour loved Bob, right?
Yes.
And he felt somewhat responsible for Bob's injured condition, right?
That would be my belief, yes.
That came from a feeling of responsibility, whether he's responsible or not, but a feeling of responsibility that Bob had been there when your mother fell to her death.
I don't know that was the cause of it. Bob was obviously had issues even before my mother's death, or our mother's death.
Well, you've made the statement before, I believe, that Seymour felt responsible for Bob being damaged. What was the basis of that statement?
That
You have made that statement,
I
haven't you?
have made that statement, yes.
And what was the basis for that statement?
That something Seymour had done or not done that caused Bob to be the way he is.
And the way he is unusual, to say the least, isn't it?
To say the least, yes.
Do you have any knowledge about the autism spectrum and Asperger's?
Judge, in that lacks foundation, it's also.
I just asked him if he had any knowledge about it. You may answer.
No, I have no knowledge of the autism spectrum.
Okay. So, even though Seymour felt some responsibility, and even though Seymour loved Bob, Seymour would not have protected Bob if he thought Bob was guilty of wrongdoing.
That is correct.
You knew, didn't you? Maybe I better ask it this way. Did you know that Bob and Kathy, soon after they were together, moved to the country and opened a natural food store?
Yes, I knew that.
What was your relationship with Bob then? Was it still the strained relationship that you had most of your life?
Yes,
But your relationship was enough, wasn't it, to know that that seemed to be a time in Bob's life when he was really happy?
yes,
Now, you dispute that Seymour made him come back and join the Durst Corporation, don't you?
absolutely, I dispute that.
But he did come back and join the Durst Corporation, right?
He did come back.
Did you know what that was about? I mean, if he was happy with Kathy running a natural food store out in the country.
My understanding that the food store failed.
Okay. So we be clear about Bob's leaving the Durst company. You know, that I'm jumping around a little bit, but so we can be clear about that, about Bob leaving the Durst company. It started when you used your influence to make sure that he was not going to be named the successor trustee, right?
That's correct.
And that happened like 3 years before Seymour made the decision that you would be the CEO.
That is correct.
So it would be incorrect for someone to say that Bob left because Seymour made that decision. That's just not correct, is it?
Which decision?
The decision to make you CEO instead of him.
If somebody said that, that would be incorrect, yes, in my opinion.
Right. Your opinion is that you're the one that saw the necessity for becoming the successor trustee rather than Bob.
Yes,
And you brought that about.
yes.
You made an effort to stop the production of All Good Things, didn't you?
I did.
it was in conjunction, not the only reason, of course, but in conjunction with your feeling that the Durst name needed to be protected.
Yes,
And you also tried to stop production of the Jinx, didn't you?
we tried to limit it, but I don't know that we actually tried to stop it.
Did you write a letter threatening Jarecki about what he was doing? And
I believe if he defamed the family, yes.
And I think you told Mr. Lewin that earlier today that at one point you thought that Jarecki was working in concert with Bob to help Bob and to hurt the Durst Corporation. Am I saying it correctly? Is that what you thought?
I don't think he was doing it to help Bob or hurt the Durst organization. I think he was doing it to help Jarecki.
Well, we pretty much know he wasn't doing it to help Bob, don't we?
Yes.
One other point. Mr. Lewin asked you about whether Bob was generous. And I believe basically your answer was no, he was very tight with his money.
Yes.
But were you aware that he has given people money in the past?
Where he gave money to Susan Berman, I've read he's given gifts to his friends, yes.
Yes. In fact, I want to show you something that's in evidence. If we can have the wolf.
They prefer that you call it a wolf.
That's fine. I'll call it the wolf. First thing I want to show you is a check. This is all in evidence. This is a check to Susan Berman for $25,000. That's the one that you were aware of.
Yes.
The date is November the 9th. It doesn't have the year on it, but I'll tell you that November the 9th is 2000. And I'll show you the...
I think we stipulated to that as well, Mr.
Yeah.
DeGuerin.
Right, I'm sure that's right. And then the endorsement, back when people used to endorse checks and the checks would go to, you'd get the check in your statement. I love you, Bobby. Thank you so much. I'll repay every penny. And I can't read it right now, but.
The exhibit number?
2018.
Thank you.
So the date on it, November the 9th, that was before the news came out. As we stipulated, the news came out that Janine Pirro was reopening the investigation, right?
Yes, I think that's... Yes, it was before the news came out.
I'll show you another one. Check to Susan Berman for $25,000. And the date on it is March 3rd. I believe we stipulated that that's 99.
I don't know if we have stipulated, but if we haven't, we will stipulate that it's March 3rd, 1999, if the court will accept that.
Yes, I think that was already agreed upon.
I think it was, but okay. So even though, by the way, do you know who Holly Lawrence is?
Do not?
Okay. Holly, that's the other check on this, two other checks on this piece of paper. To Holly Lawrence, February 24th, 99, it almost looks like 97, but it is 99, for $10,000. And you don't know her?
I do not.
Okay. So even though the first check I showed you to Susan Berman for the $25,000 is right about the same time as the news came out, but really before it was in the papers. March the 3rd of 99 was a year and a half before there was any reopening of the investigation, wasn't there?
That's correct.
I said that was a final subject, but you know, you shouldn't trust a lawyer when they say that to you.
I don't.
Okay, good. Bob and Kathy, in the last year that they were together, you were not aware of any divorce discussions, were you?
At the Christmas party, Kathy told me she wanted to divorce Bob.
Well, you told Mr. Lewin, didn't you, that you were not aware there were divorce discussions?
I was not aware until Kathy told me she wanted to get a divorce.
Okay. Were you aware that there was never a divorce filed?
I was not aware that a divorce was never filed, no.
If a divorce had been filed, the Durst organization would probably be aware of it, wouldn't they?
Not necessarily, no.
Well, particularly if Kathy or her lawyers were threatening to involve the Durst organization or try to break the trust or whatever divorce lawyers try to do nowadays or back then, you would have been
That's not an evidence, it's improper hypothetical.
that's mumbling. I object to a mumbling objection.
You can finish your question, but I'm likely to sustain it. Break it down into smaller questions.
If a divorce lawyer representing Kathy had tried to involve the Durst organization or the Durst Trust, you would have been aware of that, wouldn't you?
Assumes facts not an evidence, also improper hypothetical.
Well, the fact is, I'm sorry, you, after all that, you can answer that question.
If a divorce lawyer filed a suit against the trust, we would have been aware of it, yes.
Okay. And there was none, right?
No, there was no suit filed against the Durst organization.
That's all.
Redirect examination.
You were asked a moment ago about gifts your brother had given and were showed various checks. Do you recall that a moment ago?
I do.
Do you recall previously stating that your brother would not give gifts without, quote, an ulterior motive?
Yes, I do recall.
What did you
saying
mean by that?
that he would be giving it for some particular reason, something he wanted from the person he was giving the gift to.
Mr. DeGuerin has suggested to you that the information about Kathy Durst being missing, I'm sorry, about the Kathy Durst reinvestigation came out on November 11th, 2000. And there was a stipulation regarding when it was in the paper. Are you aware, Mr. Durst, that your brother has said that he found out about it on October 31st, before that check was written?
Yes.
And in terms of describing, when you said an ulterior motive, would, let's say, helping Bob Durst cover up the killing of his wife, would you consider that to be an ulterior motive?
Yes, I would.
Are you aware that Mr. Durst bought a very nice Lexus? Mr. DeGuerin has corrected me that it was the cheapest Lexus for his attorney and his wife, Stuart and Emily Altman.
I read that, yes.
Would you consider that to be an act of generosity or an ulterior motive?
I would consider that to be an ulterior motive, yes.
You were shown a check from somebody named Holly, or to Holly. Do you have any idea what that involves?
No idea.
I want to also ask you, you were questioned about collect calls and whether they were accepted. Were collect calls also accepted from the spouses of Durst family members?
Yes,
And you were also asked particularly about a call from San Francisco in February of 2002, a collect call. Do you recall that?
I do recall being asked.
To the best of your knowledge, was your brother Tom living in the San Francisco area in 1982?
I really can't say, I don't recall.
Based on your knowledge and experience, are you aware of any Durst family members living in payphones in Barnegat, New Jersey, or Ship Bottom, New Jersey?
No,
As far as you know, of any Durst members, were they living in payphones or no?
no Durst family members were living in or near payphones.
So if those calls emanated from payphones, the calls that I asked you about from New Jersey, would those be consistent with the kind of phone numbers that would be accepted by Durst employees?
So could you repeat that?
Yes.
Objection.
Yes? Say what your objection is.
Well, I guess I should have objected quicker about living in a payphone. That's just
I
ridiculous.
think in the booth, but yeah, that's, that is ridiculous. But I think we just all let that one go. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I want you to assume for a moment that the calls from New Jersey that I asked you about emanated from payphones, one of them inside a laundromat. I want you to assume that for a moment. Are you aware of any Durst?
No basis.
There's already been a stipulation regarding phone numbers.
Overall.
Are you aware of any Durst family members or their spouses living in payphones or in a laundromat in New Jersey at that time?
I'm
Speculation.
not aware of it.
Overall.
Let's talk about the collect call from Mavis Tire Shop.
Yes,
You've now seen the phone records, is that correct?
that's correct.
Do the phone records definitively show that the collect call from Mavis Tire was made on February 2nd and not February 1st, 1982?
That is correct.
Is it fair to say that either you mistakenly
Clarification.
said,
Yes, okay.
It says whether it was done this or that, and then he said that's correct. So it doesn't, the answer doesn't respond to the question.
Non-responsive? Okay, let me look. I thought I understood the answer, but as it was affirming the premise of the question. You didn't understand it that way?
Well, the premise of the question was it made from this place, from the first or from the second? And he said that's correct. Well, that doesn't answer the question. Was
Why
it
don't
the
you go
first?
through those questions and answers again?
you've had a chance to look at those phone records, correct?
That is correct.
And there was a collect call made from your Katona house on February 1st, is that
That is
right?
correct, yes.
There was another call made on Tuesday, February 2nd from Mavis Tire in Katona, is that correct?
That is correct.
And as you sit here today, are you the person who made the call from Mavis Tire in Katona?
I am the person who made the call on February 2nd, Tuesday sorry. Try it again.
Okay. Are you the person who made the collect call from Mavis Tire in Katona on February 2nd?
Well, Mavis Tire's in Mount Kisco, that's what you're trying to
Oh, I'm
confuse.
sorry. My fault.
I am the person who made the call from Mavis Tire.
Thank you. From Mavis Tire in Mount Kisco.
Yes.
Excuse me. And that is the call that appears on the call sheet you looked at. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, Mr. Durst, is it fair to say that either when you were interviewed, you mistakenly said that call was made on Monday, or the detectives mistakenly wrote down Monday?
I believe, in thinking about it, that I said Tuesday the 1st, and it was both of our mistakes.
And Tuesday was the 2nd, is that
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And as you sit here today, is it fair to say that you have a better memory that you in fact made this collect call regarding the tires from the shop in Mount Kisco versus whether it occurred on Monday or Tuesday?
I have a very good recollection of making that call from Mavis.
Now, you've testified, Mr. DeGuerin has asked you about Bob and Kathy using Quaaludes. That was in the early 70s, correct?
That is correct.
That was before they bought their home in South Salem and were living with you, correct?
That is correct.
And at that time, you had children who were living with you, correct?
That is correct.
So was the issue that Kathy Durst was a Quaalude or cocaine addict, or was the issue that you just didn't want drug use happening in front of your children?
That was one of the issues. It was a very difficult living situation with young children in the house. And one thing that sticks out in my memory is that I hung a swing on a tree outside a window where they had
Non-responsive.
living room.
I'll allow the witness to explain his answer.
And Bob cut the swing down. Made my children very upset. So it wasn't a good. It wasn't just the drugs. It was just the whole relationship.
And were the issues that you had, which caused you to want Bob and Kathy to leave, were they issues with Bob, or were they issues with Kathy, or were the issues with both? Who were the issues with?
The issues were with Bob.
At any point in time, either when you lived with Kathy or afterwards, did you ever see her exhibiting signs that she was a drug addict?
No, I never saw signs of her being a drug addict.
You also said, you were asked about Bob's phone call when he told you about Kathy being missing. And your words were that he seemed distraught when he told you that Kathy was missing. Do you recall that testimony?
I do, yes.
Do you know if he was actually distraught?
Speculation.
Overruled.
He did not seem as distraught as I would have been if my wife was missing for 3 days.
And to whatever level he appeared distraught, do you know if that was genuine?
Speculation.
Overruled.
Do you remember my question?
I remember your question, and there's almost no emotion that Bob shows that is genuine.
And let me ask you something. Given your relationship with your brother, I want you to assume the following. I want you to assume that Bob Durst had killed his wife. Would you expect him on the phone to say to you, hey, Douglas, Sunday night I killed my wife Kathy?
No, he would not say that.
Whether Bob was guilty or innocent, would you expect Bob to tell you or to attempt to appear distraught over his missing wife?
He would attempt to appear distraught, yes.
There was also, you testified in response to Mr. DeGuerin, that, quote, that Bob gave every appearance, unquote, that he wanted Kathy found. Again, do you know if the, quote, every appearance was genuine?
Speculation.
Overruled. The question is whether he knows, not whether it was.
Do you know if it was genuine?
I do not know if it was genuine.
Do you have any idea, you were asked about what Bob did, do you have any idea what instructions Bob gave to his private detective or exactly what he asked him to do?
I do not know.
I want to go back to the wedding in Houston that you attended shortly before Morris Black was killed. At the time that you attended that wedding, were you aware that your brother was living in a rundown studio apartment in Galveston disguised as a mute woman?
No, I was not.
Did you know, prior to him coming to Houston, where he was residing at all?
No, I learned in Houston that he was living in Galveston.
Did you learn at the time specifically where he was living?
No.
Did you know that he was living in Galveston as a mute woman?
No, I did not know.
As far as you know, did anybody else in your family at that wedding, were they aware that Bob Durst was living as a mute woman in Galveston?
Objection.
No.
Yes?
Asking what other people knew?
That's called speculation.
Speculation.
Sustained. This is true.
Your Honor, can Mr. DeGuerin make his, the court has said you want ground stated for an objection?
That's right. Well, Texas is a little different. Sorry.
But does the judge help in Texas too?
No, I mean, he's describing speculation.
Don't
That's what
start
it
talking
was.
about the judge.
It's fine.
So, all right, let me ask it this way. At the time that the wedding took place, are you aware, so I'm asking what you personally know, are you aware of whether any of your family members knew that Bob Durst was living in Galveston, Texas as a new woman?
Not aware of any of my family members knowing that Bob was living as a mute woman in Galveston, Texas.
I want you to assume for a moment that one of your family members had known that at the time. Given your relationship, is that something that you think would have been shared with you?
Hold on. That's an improper formal question.
Overruled.
Yes, they would have told me immediately.
Finally, Mr. DeGuerin has brought up to you problems that Kathy Durst was having in medical school, he has said, with studies, with rotations and at medical school. Do you recall him asking you those questions?
Yes, I do.
Did you know, Mr. Durst, that at the time that your brother has admitted that he was emotionally abusing and physically abusing and terrorizing his wife throughout that period when she was trying to complete her medical school studies?
I have since learned that that's the case, yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Additional questions?
No.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes?
Yes.
You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You know, we were going to start, but it would give us 10 minutes of the next witness, meaning the recording.
I've had quite enough, Mr. Enough for one day. Let's spread it out over the week.
You are excused now, first.
Ladies and gentlemen, we should expect we'll be able to start tomorrow at 9 if everything lines up perfectly. So do not talk about the case or about any of the people or any subject involved in it with anyone, including the other jurors. Don't make up your mind about any issue until you discuss the case with the other jurors during deliberations. Don't converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. See you then.